Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Blair Schlechter. I'm the Vice President of Economic Development and Government Affairs here at the Chamber. I'm here with a couple of the other Chamber colleagues, including Nick Lair, who's Director of Programs. Thank you for joining us. Just a quick overview of the partnership we have with the Small Business Development Center. We are doing kind of frequent webinars on key business topics for the business community. This is something we do in partnership with the City of Beverly Hills. Thank you for that. One thing we'd like to make you aware of is if you're a Beverly Hills business, we have an agreement with the city to provide free complimentary one-on-one consultations with your business by an advisor from SBDC, and they're great advisors. So if you're interested in that, check our website. Anyone in Beverly Hills business or there can take advantage of it and encourage you to do so. We also are trying to get additional feedback on kind of our programming, what people like to see in terms of either educational stuff or networking. So if you have ideas, please reach out to us. You can either use the chat box or you can always reach me. My email is my last name, Schlechter, S-C-H-L-E-C-T-E-R, at beverlyhillschamber.com. With that, I'm going to introduce Larry Johnson, who leads up the efforts at SBDC. Larry is one of our key advisors in the chamber at the SBDC, and he's been kind of providing a wide range of educational seminars during what's become a critical time. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over to Larry, and I'd ask anyone who's on the call if you could please mute your phones so we can have a clean call and everyone can hear each other. And you're welcome to submit questions during the course of the talk. Larry, take it away.
Thanks, Blair, and welcome everyone to our update for COVID-19 relief programs. And as Blair mentioned, please add any questions or comments into the chat box, and later as we get to the end of the presentation, we'll open it up and you can ask voice questions. In the meantime, your questions in the chat box, and we'll get started. Well, this has been an unbelievable period in the life of our country. I've got emergency vehicles passing around. And a week or so ago, we lost both of the key programs. And I want to mention that these federal programs are the best that we have available, bar none. While the state, the city, and certain corporations and private entities have come up with some other small efforts, it is these two federal programs, the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan and the Paycheck Protection Program, that have the breadth and depth that small business needs. And now that Congress is acting on these programs, we had the Senate approve on Tuesday, and then the bill went to the House of Representatives, and I believe they are debating and voting. I think the vote is underway, and because of social distancing, they're casting their votes 50 members each at a time into the chamber. So it's going to take a while before the whole thing is completed. But we should have that bill approved today and ready for the president's signature, which my guess is will happen either, depending on the hour the vote is completed, it'll happen tonight, or at the very latest, I think first thing tomorrow morning. So Nick, next slide, please. So my name is Larry Johnson. I'm the program lead advisor at El Camino College. And next slide, please. And at El Camino, we provide one-on-one consulting, and in fact, we provide one-on-one consulting in Beverly Hills for Beverly Hills residents and businesses, courtesy the City of Beverly Hills and the Beverly Hills Chamber. And we also do workshops here in the city on a regular basis. We will work with you whether you are pre-venture or you've been in business a few months, or have you've been in business for 30 years. Doesn't matter. Next slide, Nick. So here are some basic highlights that are the latest and greatest as of this morning. We have approximately $300 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program, which is the model program designed to help the most uh, uh, businesses in getting people back to work. There is the EIDL program, the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan Program, that's receiving an additional $60 billion. And then associated with the EIDL program is an emergency grant of up to $10,000. That's receiving $10 billion. Uh, and, and the program has a feature now which addresses certain economic disparities that were noticed from that there were many of the smaller companies were suggesting that they were not getting an equal shot at the money, that they were somehow being muscled out by larger companies with the large banks. The banks were giving the larger companies preference. So to address that issue, it's my understanding that the bill contains a provision that allocates at least $60 billion to small community lenders, which makes it a lot more amenable for you as a small business to get access to these funds. Next slide, please. So just to make sure, here are the specifics. If you haven't already applied, or if you have already applied on or after March 31st, and you have an application number beginning with 3, you're already in the queue for EIDL. It's very important to note. This is something that we were made aware of just recently, that if you don't have an application number beginning with a 3, you should reapply again. That's going to be very important because they updated the portal for applications, and they could not grandfather any people who had applied before. You must apply again. And the portal, while closed now, it's only closed temporarily because once the president signs the bill authorizing funding, the doors will be open again for you to apply. So keep your eyes peeled for that occurrence. Now, for PPP, if your application has been accepted by a financial institution, you don't have to do anything. But the one thing we want to make sure no one does, and that is apply multiple to multiple institutions at the same time. If you've submitted your application to one institution, it's been accepted by that institution, it's in process, and you're frustrated that it's taking so long, don't decide to automatically apply to another lender, because that will only delay your process. The application process will stop when it's determined that there's a duplicate application and it won't be acted on. So it's going to be very important that that if you desire to switch institutions, that you alert the institution that you started with that you want to withdraw your application from their consideration, so that any future action is not delayed or upheld. Now, the program also allows currently for sole proprietors, independent contractors, and other folks with no W-2 employees. It makes them eligible to apply for the Payroll Protection Program. This is something, there was some controversy here because it wasn't very clear. The information that we had originally said that they could apply, but then when you ask the question, if you were a sole proprietor or an independent contractor or someone with no W-2 employees, you ran into a question mark, a roadblock, because how could you apply for PPP if you have no payroll? And so the folks at the SBA agreed that if you could show some type of income, whether it's draw income or some sort of payment you make to yourself. And the ideal way that would be shown would be on Schedule C, line 31 of your tax return. So what most of the banks will require is to have a copy of Schedule C, not necessarily the whole tax return, but a copy of Schedule C so that they could determine what that amount that would be the effective payroll amount. So let me just reiterate, if you applied prior to March 31st for EIDL and your approval number does not begin with the number 3, you must reapply to the SBA portal. And you will not be able to reapply until they open the portal doors again, which will be once the president signs the funding bill, once that is approved. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes where we are. Remember, EIDL is a loan program designed to provide small business with finances that will help address working capital losses. It's a larger, comprehensive plan. It takes a look at all of your basic business expenses and allows you to borrow up to $2 million to address the loss and damage that occurred to your business due to COVID-19. It provides you with a loan of up to 30 years in maturity, where the first payment is deferred for 12 months. And it carries an interest rate of 3.75% for-profit companies. Now, the CARES Act provided an additional advantage for EIDL. And that additional advantage was in the form of a $10,000 for potentially forgivable cash advance. So EIDL was given an additional benefit of up to $10,000 in a potential cash advance that could be in a cash advance that could be potentially forgivable. EIDL could be used for a variety, as I said, expenses that covered not only fixed debt and payroll, accounts payable, utilities, but pretty much any standard business expense. And you apply for EIDL directly to the SBA website, and it's listed here, covid19relief.sba.gov. The PPP program, on the other hand, is designed to provide aid to businesses so that they can retain workers and provide you with the opportunity for forgiveness if certain conditions are met. Now, you access the amount that you could borrow under PPP by simply taking your average monthly payroll and multiply it by 2.5. If you don't have monthly payroll, you would take your Schedule C income, that total number, divided by 12 to get an average monthly Schedule C income, and multiply that average monthly by 2.5. Same procedure, same process. And that's the number that would give you what you could borrow. If you have no Schedule C income, like many people manage their businesses so that they don't, they can avoid having to pay tax. They have sufficient expenses. Then that means that you are not eligible for PPP, but you're still eligible for EIDL. You have an opportunity under EIDL to get the up to $2 million loan or potentially the cash advance. Now, I know many people have had difficulties getting access under PPP. In the beginning, many of the larger banks either said that they were only going to serve their existing customers, only going to serve their customers who were of a certain stature. They had certain loans outstanding, or they had other size accounts. but that has changed somewhat. The banks may require that you be a lending customer still, the larger banks. So the real opportunity here for you is with the smaller banks. The smaller regional banks offer the greatest opportunity for our entrepreneurs and small businesses to take advantage of the payroll protection plan. And in the payroll protection plan, your amount of your loan is forgiven if you meet certain conditions. And the conditions include the fact that you must have equivalent or greater number full-time equivalents at the beginning of the COVID disaster or before the COVID disaster began, as you do 2 months after funding. So they measure your full-time equivalents 2 months after funding, and they compare that to what it was prior to COVID, right? And they also look at whether or not you were able to spend 75% of the loanable amount on salaries and salary-related expenses. In addition, the remaining 25% of the loanable amount can be spent on other business-related expenses. So in order to qualify to be considered, you've got to meet the two conditions of 75% and 25%, and then to be considered, to be approved to get 100% forgiveness on the borrowed amount under PPP, you must have the same or greater number of employees, full-time equivalent employees, in 2 weeks after the awarding of loanable funds. Next slide, please. So this summarizes many of the points we just mentioned. First, that EIDL is a direct loan from the SBA. You apply directly to the SBA. And EIDL, you're eligible for EIDL if you're self-employed, you're a contractor, a solopreneur, and that as long as you are below 500 employees, you are eligible. The loan size can be up to $2 million, and the interest rate 3.75%, and there is a potential for a cash advance of $10,000. Now, I say potential because if you have no W-2 employees, then you would be counted as an employee, you as the owner, CEO, and the business would receive $1,000 as a cash advance. That may be forgivable, but no more than that. So it's awarded based on the number of W-2 employees that you have. I had a client yesterday who has 10 employees. He's got a restaurant. He's got 10 employees. He received $10,000. I have other clients who have 2 or 3 employees. They receive $2,000 or $3,000. And so it's directly tied to the number of W-2 employees you have. And you can use the proceeds for not only payroll, but also other fixed debt and accounts payable related to typical business-related expenses. Now, you can apply for EIDL and PPP at the same time, but you cannot receive duplicate funds from both PPP and EIDL. You can't cover the same expenses that you claimed in EIDL and also PPP. Now, with PPP, it's a federally guaranteed loan. The banks make the decision. The loan is guaranteed 100% by the full faith and credit of the United States. Self-employed, contractors, solopreneurs, for-profit and nonprofit businesses are eligible, and businesses with less than 500 employees operating as of 2/15 are eligible to participate in this program. The loan size is determined based on the product of 2.5 times an employer's average monthly payroll cost, or its Schedule C average monthly income, up to $10 million, and that is designed to cover salary, wages, commissions, cash tips, and group health benefits. And the interest rate on a PPP loan is 1% with a maximum term of 2 years, and it is and then it will be forgiven if those conditions are met. And I mentioned the conditions under which a debt can be forgiven. That's payroll costs, mortgage interest payments, written utilities. Those are eligible expenses for debt forgiveness. And no collateral or personal guarantees are required. I did get one question in the box. I'd like to address that now. So what if a company received an email from EIDL previously and have not received a number, but have received an email that states you will receive $1,000 per employee up to 10 employees? Should the company still apply for EIDL? Well, again, if you don't have an application number, if you never receive an application number, you obviously applied prior to March 31st. So that means you must reapply and get a number when the window opens again. And another one is a representative of large banks that apply to more than one institution. Well, if that representative would say that if they were no longer going to act on your application. So you cannot have two active applications going at the same time, or you will be taken out of the queue for consideration. So it's very important that you do that. Okay, next slide, please. So these are some important things to keep in mind. There are certain costs that are eligible, as I mentioned before. Salary, wages, commissions, those are cash pay. Those are payments that are considered part of your payroll, including vacation, parental or family leave, medical expenses, sick leave, any allowance for dismissal or separation, payments for group health care, premiums for those expenses, payment of retirement, and payment of state and local tax for compensation. And the costs that are not eligible are those costs for an employee or owner that are over $100,000. Anything under 100 is acceptable. They want to be able to reward or cover the costs of employees who make $100,000 or less, not those who make more. And taxes are taxes imposed covering the various chapters of the IRS code are also not eligible. Someone asked, is advertising expense covered? It would be one of those expenses of operating expenses of the business that would be covered under EIDL, but not under the PPP program. Allowable uses of the loan proceeds also include not just payroll and salaries and commissions, but also group health insurance, family leave insurance premiums, pick and save, sick and medical leave, and payments on the mortgage obligations, lease or rent, and utilities. Next slide, please. So this particular form, and we'll make sure a copy of this presentation is made available to everyone, walks you through the kinds of information that the Paycheck Protection Program asks a borrower, and again, they want to know what your monthly payroll is, or your Schedule C income from line 31, and then they ask various questions on the applicant regarding your personal character with regards to legal issues, and they want to know if you received any funds under EIDL, and they want to know specific information about any individual who has ownership of 20% or more of the company, and whether you've had any type of legal conviction, or you were guilty of any issue concerning financial or legal issues that would be uh, appropriate for them to be aware of, that would paint a different picture of you as an applicant. So they want people with a clean history. If you had a traffic citation, that's not an issue to be concerned with. They're concerned with other more significant legal questions. Next slide, please. So idols, we summarize this in a fair amount of detail. This is just a replication of we spoke about earlier. I want to emphasize that you can um, uh, do both EIDL and PPP at the same time, as long as you don't pay the same payroll and related expenses at the same time. And the advance from EIDL does not need to be repaid, and may be used to keep employees on payroll and sick leave. And I want to emphasize, I've gotten several of the same questions. If you applied prior to March 31st and your application does not begin with the number 3, you must reapply. You must reapply. Next slide, please. So this identifies the ineligible uses of EIDL, and it's refinancing other long-term debt, paying any part of federal debt, including SBA loans, except IRS obligations. I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit. If a federal debt is delinquent, the SBA must have written documentation from the appropriate federal agency on how it's going to be cured. Paying down or paying off loans provided or guaranteed or insured by the federal government or an SBIC, and Federal Deposit Insurance and Resolution Trust Corporation are not considered federal agencies. So if you got any arrangement with them, they're not considered federal agencies for this purpose. Next slide, please. There's a question that came in. I think I'll try to address this now. Someone logged into the city's PPP portal that they had last week in connection with Goldman Sachs, got through, received the confirmation of pre-application. They said you would hear from a loan officer. You never did. Only received a notice from the city saying that they were out of PPP funds. Seems strange as all this went down in a 10-hour period. Not sure who to contact. You know, as I mentioned before, the federal programs are the best programs. The city and the state and the county all have good intentions, but unfortunately, the intentions did not measure up to the huge demand that we have. And the only folks that are able to address this huge demand effectively, and they are having some difficulty just because of the size and the volume of the need, is the federal government. So that program, they indicated you received a pre-qualification, and they encourage you to go elsewhere because they couldn't meet your need. So I think you could feel free in that situation to apply to another financial institution. Okay. So if you get an EIDL or an emergency economic injury advance, can you get a PPP loan? Uh, yes, you can, but we got to make sure that you don't apply for the same funds and use the same reason, the same payroll amount. So if you get half of your employee base covered under EIDL, you can't try to cover that same employee base under PPP. That's what we would call double dipping, and that's not allowed. If you ultimately receive a PPP loan or refinance an EIDL into PPP, which is possible, any advance amount received under the EIDL would be subtracted from the amount forgiven in the PPP, right? and as I said before, you can't use it for the same purpose. There are, if there are any questions you might have on whether your business is a small business, there is an SBA website that addresses that issue, and you apply for EIDL by going to directly, you get direct to the application and not any interim pages by going direct to COVID-19 relief.sba.gov. And if you need help with the uh, application process for EIDL, it is in current form a very streamlined, straightforward, easy to fill out process. But if you need assistance, the SBDCs, in addition to the SBA, are available to provide that kind of assistance. Next slide, please. So the small business debt relief, the SBA has deemed it appropriate to provide assistance to borrowers within their SBA existing programs, the 7A loans, 504 loans, and micro loans. These are great opportunities these opportunities are available, but they're not meant to be in place of the existing PPP and EIDL programs. These are just additional programs that are part of the standard loan programs that the SBA has always had in place. 7A loans, 504 loans, and micro loans, and these programs are available. But I should mention that the banks that provide and make these loans are now pretty much all focused on meeting the needs of those applicants who would like to take advantage of the government programs. Um, and either EIDL or PPP, that's what they're going after. So if you're interested in exploring one of these other programs, the banks are on hold with regards to addressing these needs at the moment until they resolve all of the EIDL and PPP related issues. Next slide, please. There, as I mentioned before, the state of California and the county and also the city of Los Angeles have announced programs. I know that the county program, unfortunately, was not adequately funded, and there was not much movement there. The city of LA still has an active program. I don't know what its funding status is at the moment. I understand that it was fairly hit. It was hit fairly heavily when it was announced. I'm not sure if it's still available in whole or part. And the county's program was depleted, and they were looking at creating another program. I don't know if that's up and running yet. And there are a variety of private organizations that have come out and that are in support of small business, and they're offering loans and other types of assistance that isn't ordinarily available. Next slide, please. So in terms of additional help, we do have the stimulus checks for individuals program. And that program, as you know, has kicked off. People who receive their tax refunds through direct deposit have already started to receive a flow of funds into their accounts because of this situation. Those who do not and rely on a mailed check, those checks have not really started to hit yet, from my understanding. People who have federal student loans, your interest and principal payment, they're all being paid for by the federal government. Those who are impacted by COVID, once again, your funds are going to be picked up by other folks, and they'll take care of your requirements for principal and interest. And the same is true for loans. The 504 loan, the 7A loan, micro loans. In this case, the SBA will pay those loan payments for 6 months. And then another important benefit is that the federal government will add $600 a week to states' unemployment programs for each individual. It's a tremendous benefit. That program for independent contractors becomes available on the 28th, and you'll be able to apply for benefits under that program. Next slide, please. So here is a listing of the resources available to you for help, for assistance with SBA customer service. The 800 number here is a number to call. They're open from 5 a.m. Pacific time to 5 p.m. Pacific time, and or you can write to customer service at sba.gov/disaster. Now I'll take a look at some of the other questions that might be here, and also you can ask a question. You can unmute your phone if you have a question to ask me directly.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. You had said your voice kind of faded out when you were talking about the PPE loan, and that you had to, something about the employee, you had to have so many employees, the same amount of employees at the end of, and I didn't hear what you were saying.
Oh, I'm sorry, I garbled that. Yes. So they take a measurement during the period 2 months after the loan has hit your bank account. So 2 months after funding, they take a measurement. They'll probably ask you for your financial statements or records to see what your full-time equivalent headcount was. And for purposes of this emergency, a full-time person is a person who's worked 30 hours, not the standard 40 hours, right? That gives you a little bit of an advantage. And they take that measurement, and what they want to see is whether or not you have the same number of full-time equivalents before the COVID disaster as you have 2 months subsequent to funding. They also want to take a look at the percentage of the loan amount that you received. What percentage of that did you spend on salaries? And that should be 75%. And also they want to look at what percentage you spent on other acceptable expenses like rent and other related business operational expenses, advertising expense and the like. They want that to be no more than 25%. So if you meet that criteria, then all of your PPP loan will be forgiven.
Okay, so you're saying that in a case where you might have furloughed the employees, you have to hire them back, and 60 days after have all the employees back at least 30 hours per week or more?
Well, the full-time equivalent, so whatever.
You said that was 30 hours?
Same full-time equivalent. So you can meet the full-time equivalent by just hiring part-time employees, but you'd have to have a larger number of part-time employees. And they don't necessarily have to be the identical employees, because some employees might not want to come back.
Oh, so you're saying you just have to have basically, so 30 hours per week would be a full-time employee. You could have 2 employees at 15 hours each.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. And
well, the equivalent of a 30-hour person. So 2 would make up 1 30-hour person.
Right. I got it. And then the other 25% has to be for rent and any other business expenses that you have.
It's got to be one of the acceptable ones, but the rent, standard operating expenses.
Yeah, okay.
Hey,
So
Mayor.
we just
Lawrence, I
have
have
to,
a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry, I'm just finishing up. So you just have to be careful if you do get the loan, you really have to have it well documented on where you're spending the money so that you can
Yes.
report it back.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Next person?
Oh, great
Um,
question.
I don't-
Lawrence, here's a question. If are there any incentives or loans or programs of any kind from the government for businesses whose activities themselves are changing in relationship to COVID-19? So for example, if a business who is manufacturing pivots their business model to instead focus on something COVID-19 related, for example, PPE or masks or gowns or gloves or anything like, those are just random examples. But is there any reason from a program standpoint for like an incentive for a business to do that outside of just the moral reasons involved?
I must say, I'm not aware of that. It may very well exist, but I'm not aware of it. We'll have to check on that for you.
All right, well, thank you and thanks for doing this.
Lawrence,
Yes.
I ask a question. If we have submitted our EIDL advance and we got the number with 3, so it's correct, how long is it taking to see these advances funded?
Okay, the process is taking at least 4 to 5 weeks before your application is acted upon. But I can assure you that we have every day of the week, we have people whose applications have been acted upon, and we receive confirmation that they walked away with funds. Some have been companies with 100 employees. Some have been companies with no employees. So it runs a gamut. And California is one of the heaviest states in terms of having applications acted upon. So we're not at a disadvantage because we're all the way on the other side of the country.
Can you give us an idea of what kind of documents you're going to need to submit for EIDL when you get that call that says, okay, we're ready to receive your stuff?
In most cases, no other documentation. Because this is not a credit review, right? They don't need to ascertain the quality of your credit. They may pull your credit, do a soft pull on your credit, just to make sure that you pay your bills, or that there aren't any circumstances that they should be aware of that would be extremely negative. You know, for example, people who've had a series of bankruptcy. One bankruptcy wouldn't necessarily do it, but a series of bankruptcies, a history of defaulting on federal loans. Those would be reasons why they might not want to go forward.
Is it going to be a straight formula? Is it going to be like gross earnings times 2.5 like we did with PPP?
So what I have been told is the cash advance portion is allocated based on the number of full-time employees you have.
Right.
If you have no full-time employees, you'll get just $1,000. And if you have multiple full-time employees, they'll be based upon the number $1,000 per employee up to $10,000.
And what about the EIDL loan itself? Will that number like be times?
That's based upon the SBA's determination of the nature of your loss.
Okay.
And for most businesses, what they have been doing is using a formula of 50% of gross profit.
All right. Great. Thank you very much.
Now, I'm not saying that that's what you're going to get. They won't tell us exactly what the metrics they're using, but we're collecting information from our clients who have received funding, and this is what those clients are telling us.
Thank you.
Hello, Lawrence. Jeff Even here. How are you doing?
Yes, good, thanks.
Yes, good. A couple of questions. With the EIDL loan, is there a covered period on that, the way there is the PPP loan, that there's an 8-week covered period? And then the second one, so what I think I determined from the last question is that they will come back to us with an amount after they review the application. Is that, and it could be up to 2 million. Is that how that works?
That's right, and there's no cover period. Oh, well,
Okay.
the idle window is open until the end of the year. So you have up until the end of the year to apply either for an additional amount if you're approved for one amount, and this the disaster continues. You have the ability to apply multiple times going forward, right? So it is there for you to use if you need it. That's the window only closes at the end of the year.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, I have a question. When it comes to the EIDL and the cash advance, you mentioned that you have determined that people tend to get $1,000 per employee. But if you are a business so there's 3 of us that own the business, so it's 3 partners, and we don't have any other employees, would we get paid per each of us, or are we kind of irrelevant in that equation?
So the way this works is that if your business is making money and on the Schedule C of your in your tax return, you show your on line 31 what your profit is, or if you've got some other documentation that shows that you have paid yourself certain draws on a regular basis in the business, then I would present that evidence to my financial institution. If there's some other federal government or report that you've prepared or had prepared for you that demonstrates that there is a certain draw amount paid to owners, that is part and parcel some of the expenses that the business pays on a regular basis, then I would submit that evidence to the financial institution. Some institutions are willing. I spoke this morning to a Chase banker who said that they would accept other proof from a sole proprietor or an S corp, multi-member LLC, other than the Schedule C. If you could prove through other forms that you had paid out certain draws on a regular basis that went to the owners, they would count that. Now that was Chase. There are other banks may take a different tack. They may want to see that Schedule C income number.
And that would be something that could potentially not, if that was paid out to the partners, it wouldn't have to be paid back.
Well, you have to meet all of the criteria. You would be eligible if you use 75% of it as salary and salary related payments, and 25% for other acceptable expenses, and you were able to show that you had the requisite the same number or greater number of full-time equivalent at the beginning, before COVID disaster, and then after the COVID disaster, right? They want to make sure that you're using the money for PPP, in the most part, to bring people back to work or to hire replacements.
Okay, thank you.
Following up on that, does EIDL have a forgiveness component similar to PPP?
Only for the up to $10,000 cash advance. That's the only forgiveness aspect of EIDL. So, you know, a lot of people have an aversion to debt, and they don't want to consider EIDL outside of the cash advance portion. But just remember, this is an up to 30-year loan with a 1-year deferral and only a 3.75% interest rate. So for 30 years, to get a jump start to your business for 6 months worth of operating expenses, that's not a bad deal. yeah, it's debt and you got to pay it back, and it's serious. You've got to consider that. But if that could make a difference in your business, short of selling equity, and that's a lot cheaper than equity would be, giving up a portion of your livelihood because of this disaster. Uh, that insurance policy of getting that idle loan, and you know, I think maybe worth it. Maybe something you want to consider, at least in saying yes, I'll take it, and maybe delaying the actual receipt until you're sure you need it. Or but I would do everything I could if to apply for it, to make sure I had it available, and then to use it when necessary.
Thank you.
And Larry, I'm
Hi,
not sure
Larry.
if
I
you
have a
saw.
question.
Yes.
I received a direct deposit amount of $1,000. I guess that's the PPP loan that I
No,
received.
no, if you received $1,000, that was probably the cash advance portion of EIDL.
Of EIDL. Okay. And then what was the loan that you said that you could receive $600 a month? That was the last thing of that you
So
said.
that wasn't a loan. That's part of the unemployment insurance. Like there's an acronym, PUA. Oh, I'm sorry, my brain is fried. I can't think of all the acronyms
No,
this
don't
afternoon.
worry.
But there's an
No, I know.
acronym that relates to the $600, and that's from the federal government. That's
It's
added
federal.
to. Yeah. And someone had a question that said that they applied for EIDL. They received an application number that begins with a 3 on April 6th, and they haven't heard anything. You won't hear anything. They are not geared to provide you with constant feedback. It would be nice if they did, certainly. Um, and so I'm with you. I applied because I have my own separate side business around the same time. I haven't heard a thing, but I do attend daily calls with the SBA, and while the intention initially was that these applications would be acted upon within 3 to 4 days, that's not the case at all. And so now they are saying 4 to 5 weeks from the time of receipt. So if you did it late in the day on the 6th, the clock doesn't start running until the next business day. And so you'll lose some time there. So that's when the clock will start to tick for the 4 to 5 weeks. But people are getting money, so. Are payments to business owners considered payroll? Yes. If you are a solo practitioner and you're trying to apply for PPP, then what you pay yourself would be considered as payroll for purposes of calculating your loanable amount. But if you received actual payroll, or you took regular withdrawals, that could be verified. Many business owners don't take regular withdrawals. Once a month, at this point in time, every month I take a withdrawal. No, they just take a withdrawal when it's needed. Could be every week, it could be every 2 months. But if you have good documentation to support that, then you could appeal to your bank that this truly is salary. These are the withdrawals. If you have a record of the withdrawals, and it's a defensible record, it's more than the back of an envelope or a napkin while at dinner one night and you recalled it. They want to see it as part of a formal financial statement or some filing with the government. And again, it's you have to present that to your bank, and to make sure that they will consider that and that they're not going to be more conservative.
I have a question.
Yes.
Larry, this is Bridget, sole practitioner. When we apply on the 28th for the new EDD, so I originally applied for unemployment. I was given 0. I think this is part of the, let's try to have these sole prop people apply again on
Yes.
the 28th.
Yeah, you got to apply when the window opens.
What information am I going to need to provide them at that point? Do you know?
I don't know what information is going to be required. There was a call today that I'm not on, that's where folks from EDD are going to be on to mention the details of that program. So I'm missing that call, but I will get a recording of that call, so I'll know the answer to that later. I'll share
Yes,
whatever information I get with the chamber, and
oh, that's fantastic.
and
And
they'll
maybe they
pass
can
that
send
on.
it out in an email.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really what we wanted to know, so that the minute they open it, we can apply and not have further delay.
Yes.
So, you know, do they want monthly of your last tax returns income? What is, or profit loss statement, what they need? That would be super helpful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. You're so great. It's wonderful to have one hub for a lot of this info. So thank you so much.
Well, I tell you, it's the foresight of the city of Beverly Hills to team up with us to make this available to you. I applaud the city for doing that. I say our quarterly bonuses, which we normally provide in the past, covered as acceptable payroll expenses. You'll have to review that with your bank if you can validate that to the degree that is acceptable to them, then it could be used. So much of this is subjective, and in some cases you've got to do a little bank shopping to see how the bank will view it. And everything that the bank agrees that they would do means that they're going to submit it to the SBA. The SBA has to bless everything, so they can come back and say, no, we want something different. But you'll only know the answer to that if 2 things happen. One, we bring it up enough time in terms of comments in our daily meetings that they realize that they've got to issue an opinion on this topic if it's not straightforward. Or you work it out with your bank, who's going to promote this to the SBA during the approval process, and help to try to support this and get it approved. I don't like the uncertainty of that. I feel uncomfortable telling you something that is that kind of loosey-goosey, but that's the reality of the environment that we're working in. That there's certain things that have not been cast in concrete that are subject to interpretation, and that's one of them. What if after 8 weeks our sales have not returned? Do we let our staff go again after having rehired them under PPP? You know, you have got to run your business as you see fit in accordance with your ability to survive. And if it means that you've got to go back into survival mode and you've got to let some people off, unfortunately, that's what has to happen. Let's see if I see any other questions. Is there a contact number for you directly? I tried to reach the 800 number a month ago, but couldn't find an extension. Well, the 800 number, a human being should ultimately answer the phone. At least now, that should happen. But my email address is right in back of me there, lrjohnson@elcamino.edu. You can always email me there, and I will. I try to respond to emails within 24 hours. And if you've got an emergency situation, the folks at the chamber know how to reach me in short order. if you've got an emergency. I know that Blair and Nick have me on speed dial, so they know where to find me. But I think you'll find the 800 number. It takes, you'll be on hold a long time, so be prepared. Bring a cup of coffee and sit in a comfortable chair. But I've had several clients who have hung in there and they've gotten a response, and they were satisfied as to how they were handled. Just going through the list of questions, see if we answered everything.
Hi, Larry. I have a question. This is Sonia. Do you have to be one of your clients to get any information from you when we call the 1-800 number? Or
Okay, the 800 number is the SBA. So the SBA and the SBDC, the SBA is the parent organization. The SBDC is one of the children. So you can call my mom, and she'll talk to you. It's easier to reach me,
I see.
and I exist to be of service and to provide information.
Perfect. Thank you.
But so if you're having trouble getting through to the SBA and you've got a burning question, please contact me. I'll get it resolved for you, or I'll at least try to answer the question. As I said, I participate in calls on a daily basis, and I have the opportunity to ask your questions to the SBA if I don't know. And then we have other colleagues who eat, sleep, drink, and breathe this topic. And so we've got lots of support group to try to address situations that you might have. So please don't hesitate to contact me. And I am available for the city of Beverly Hills. So if you have a business in Beverly Hills, or if you're a member of the chamber, you have every opportunity to get personal service from me and from the Small Business Development Center. And so our job is to support you and your businesses, not just during this crisis, but even after the crisis. You know, I'm working on a project now that's focused on helping restaurants get back. And so we'll be doing a webinar. I've been working with Blair and Nick about doing another one. We did one about a week ago for the restaurant industry. We're going to do another one for the restaurant industry in terms of getting the restaurant industry back in business to the degree that is permitted by our political leaders. We will, working within those boundaries that they set and the guidelines that they provide, we'll have ideas and concepts in terms of how to take advantage of the opportunity to move your business forward. So I believe that if you go to the chamber website, you'll be able to find information about the SBDC and about our services and how to sign up for one-on-one consulting. I have so there are about 15 advisors at El Camino College. I personally have at least 10 or 15 clients I speak with regularly who are businesses located here and are chamber members. The most prominent of which is, and if I mention one, I'll only mention one, but there are a number of others. But Marikai Fitness, Anna is just a fabulous client and is doing so well with her business. And I'd like to think that we had a small part in her advancement, and we work very closely with with the members of the chamber and residents and businesses in the city to help them really become the best that they can be, no matter what the situation is. In these troubled times, there are ways to take advantage of that and turn lemons into lemonade. That's the hopeful goal and objective here. Are there questions?
One of the questions, Larry, would be if any of these businesses that are on the call have any topics that in the future we can cover that they foresee at this time. I know it might be a little tough because we don't know exactly where we will be in the next few weeks, but if there are any topics or any questions that we can expand on, we can set our programming up for the next time we meet.
That's a great idea. We've got lots of resources, lots of smart people, and if we need to bring in other professionals and leaders into the mix, we can certainly do that. So please let us know if there are any issues that you need to chat with. Let's see, someone says they have an IDLE application. They haven't heard anything since April. I think we touched on that. If you've applied and you haven't heard anything, and you've got it starts with the letter 3, number 3. Just be patient. You should hear something within the next week or so. What can be done from the SBDC with respect to recovery post-COVID? Well, that's an excellent question. We are ready, willing, and able to help you develop the strategies that will get you there. Just to give you an example, I like to use restaurants as an example, but I have a restaurateur in the area that is a client of mine. And when this happened, he was pulling his hair out because he had a very successful restaurant business and catering business. And now everything was on hold. And so after I slapped him around a few times, no, I didn't touch him, but I verbally captured his attention and suggested that we take a look at what he really could do and how he could really make a difference. And he came up with a collection of menu items that would be effective in grab and go, that were customer favorites. He came up with a mechanism to get that product to his consumer audience through several different vehicles, one of which was working with local craft breweries and had them carry his grab and go items. Because people were coming to craft breweries to buy their pints and quarts of beer, they can do a one-stop shop and pick up a grab and go dinner at the same time. And so that really made a difference for him. And his grab and go business, together with the walk-in clientele for pickup, and really made a big difference. And he's doing quite well in his business. So we try to do outside of the box thinking. We try to provide whatever support and advice we can in relationship to bringing in other professionals that we are affiliated with who can provide insight. But we're there to work with you on marketing strategy, social media, operations, help you with certain broad legal issues. Like I said, we don't give legal opinions, but we give you advice and information and resources that you can utilize. I have one question. I'm a general contractor and working with a number of restaurants and other businesses on redesign ideas for their spaces to get ready for reopening, and you'll be happy to assist. So I think, Gene, if you let the chamber know about you, and I'm sure this is going to be important. I'd like to know more about you and what you do, because a lot of what's going to have to happen in restaurants is the redesign of restaurants and spaces. and maybe many of our restaurants will also become large kind of deli operations where you can grab and go and get meal components, some of your favorite dishes, because you won't be able to necessarily get a reservation to sit in the restaurant. There's nothing wrong with being able to grab your favorite appetizer on the way home, and your favorite wine that they can package for you in this relaxed environment. It just makes a lot of sense, and to be able to have someone like Eugene to come in and help them in a more efficient way redesign their interior to allow for this, I think is going to be very helpful. And I think Gene has provided his contact information in the chat, so everyone can capture it. And one of the things, in speaking with Anna at Marikai Fitness earlier, we chatted about the amount of stress we're all under, and we spend working from home. We spend so much time and effort at our laptops, on our phones, and we don't take a break and smell the roses. And that's so important. So whether you do yoga, we've got lots of yoga instructors and physical therapists and fitness people and personal coaches as members of the chamber, who, in addition to Anna, who can help you sort of address some of these soft issues about survival in this area, and not just survival, but excelling mentally and physically. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, because we've got to take care of ourselves in many ways, not just financially, in order to successfully get through this. One question, my question is about the reduction of employees without affecting the PPP payments or repayments. We've heard that as long as we keep any eventual layoff to less than 25% of the workforce, there won't be any negative effect on the PPP amount or eventual forgiveness. Okay, the rules for forgiveness are very straightforward. They relate to your full-time equivalent account pre-COVID and then post-COVID. It must be the same or equal. The rules also relate to the percentage of the loan amount that you use for payroll and payroll-related expenses. It must be 75% of the loan amount. And finally, it relates to what you do with the other 25% of the loan amount. It has to be for approved business expenses. So that's the criteria. Whether you laid off 25%, that doesn't directly apply, as long as it doesn't affect the metrics that are being aimed at in the criteria I mentioned previously. Hopefully that's clear. I want to make sure that's understood. Other questions? Well, I want to thank you all very much for great questions and insights. We'll be doing this and other webinars frequently, and the Chamber has other programs and messaging that will be coming out. Several of you are putting business advice in the chat box, so I'd like all of you to make sure you check out the chat box for assistance. We have a printing shop owner who has been in the city for Moonlight Printing for over 30 years. Take a look at his link. And again, Nick has provided my email address, and so you can contact me if there's anything that I can do personally, and we can do at the Small Business Development Center. And check the Chamber website regularly for information about networking, education, and marketing advocacy. Chamber is there to be of service to you, and they've got lots of great programs. Okay. Well, thank you all very much, and have a great afternoon, remainder of the afternoon and evening, and stay safe out there, please.
Thank you so much, Larry. We appreciate your partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
Okay.
Larry. Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.